Right, we're live. Right. Okay, I'll get that link out as soon as possible to you, and I'm going to send that to your email. Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the one we're on now. Right. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Let's wait for it to arrive.
Yeah, bear with us, guys, if you're just watching this now. So I'm just going to get this out to Steve. So, there you go. Let me see what you see there, Steve. Da-da-da.
Okay, I'm still waiting for it to arrive in the inbox.
Yep, it should be with you. Let's see.
Okay, there it is. Just turned up.
Just turned up. Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Let me open it. Click on it.
Yep.
With a little bit of luck.
Better look. We'll be online, so bear with me here. Right. I need to get this out to social media. Are we going to here? My email. It's going to be sent out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got the rotating circle of death, but it'll probably.
So you remember what to do? Mute, pause the video, and yeah. Hi Josh, how you doing, mate? As you know, it takes a couple of minutes for this to get out. So, right, I'm gonna do my job here. But yeah, Steve, what have you been up to this afternoon or today?
Well, I was going to say for all you England fans, congratulations. I think the first time since '66 in a knockout round, right?
Not bad, yes, yeah. So it should be a
For
good Q&A.
for the Yanks that are on board, you probably haven't been paying much attention, but on this side of the Atlantic, it's a big deal. England beat Germany convincingly 2-0.
Oh wow!
Finished up just about a half an hour ago, and
Oh
it's the
wow!
first time they've beaten them in in a knockout round since '66.
Oh wow!
And I got a few. Well, I've got Battle Waffle up from Germany. Hi, Battle Waffle. Commiserations, buddy.
Yeah, bear with us, guys. As you know, it takes me a couple of minutes to get everything out to social media, but so bear with me, guys, and then we're going to get this great Q&A started with the legend that is now Steve Ladd. Right, okay, you're going to me. So let's see what we got here. Bear with me, folks. I just need to get this out. Right, save all. And that'll be go to there. Replace.
Hello, Danielle, Rick, and Brian.
Yeah, so it seems like we got some people in already, but yeah, maybe Steve, like, just why get this out? Maybe like for people who haven't watched, like part 1 and part 2 of your interview, or even like read your book, maybe give
Yep.
us like a brief overview of your career before we get into the questions.
Okay. I'll try to briefly cover 28 years flying
Yeah, I know it's
around.
a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah, yeah. Now the career, folks. For those of you who haven't read the book or seen the videos so far, covered 28 years of flying fighters for the United States Air Force. I flew Phantoms for 12 of those years. Transitioned to the A10 for the last 12. Ended up with 2,200 hours in each of those two airplanes, and here we are today. I've written a book about it, which I'll wave at you sometime or another before we finish this Q&A. I'm sure. And it was a hell of a ride, and I enjoy talking about it. So I'll enjoy fielding your questions, and I'll enjoy this next time together with you.
Yeah, so guys, so in the in the chat there, get your questions in because Steve's a legend. He's flown the F-4 as you know and the A10. He went to the fighter weapons school, so plenty of questions to come in. But so get them in the questions. I'm sure Steve will get to them. But Steve, as you can see on the side there, there's some coming in,
Yep.
so I'm gonna let you loose and enjoy, mate.
Okay. Thank you very much. And good evening to all of you again. Battle Waffle, Danielle Ahmed, Rick's Life, Brian Pang, and the 88 Tench, I think. Alexander Vater, who says, please stop talking soccer. I'll stop that right now because as a Yank, I'm not a big fan to begin with. So we'll just leave that behind and you guys can sort that out together. We'll start out with the questions. Rick's Life asks, does the A10 pull a lot of G's? Yeah, the A10 pulls a lot of G's. You could get normally about 7.5. Not as much as some of the more modern jets, the F-16 or the F-15. But then again, the A-10 was so maneuverable, you didn't need to pull that kind of G to get a really rip-roaring turn going. Okay, Brian Pang, afternoon. 88 Tench, hello. Waiting for something else to come up. Oh, here they are if I scroll down. Okay. Heitzevek, I believe, just finished your great book. I know you stated you didn't want to cover much detail on your combat missions in Vietnam, but I, for one, would love to hear about some of them if you're inclined. Yeah, the reason I didn't write a great deal about my Vietnam tour was the fact that I didn't do anything particularly special there. I didn't do anything that hundreds of other fighter pilots weren't doing, so consequently, when I went to write the book, I decided that I would cover a couple of things, which I did. I covered an absolutely terrifying bout with spatial disorientation, and a couple of other things. But the missions that I flew, 204 of them in a year's time, were no more or less exciting than those of about 99% of the folks that flew. So I can't regale you with great tales of heroism because in my case, there weren't any. I was doing my job. I think I did it pretty well. I think we turned a fair number of Ho Chi Minh's trucks into scrap iron, and that's what I was over there to do. But didn't see any MiGs over there, saw some later, because at the time we weren't bombing up in North Vietnam. We were doing all our work on the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos, so didn't tie up with any MiGs in that part of the world. And in fact, although every mission had its moments of excitement, some had moments of stark terror, but none of them, quite honestly, was something that I would put up in a book that I was writing about what's a brotherhood, really. Okay, let's go on. Harara, what do you think of PAF? I'm not sure what that means, so I'm going to have to move on from that one unless you want to come up later and explain it. For Bram Drunkert, what was it like to have to change from the F-4 to the A10? It was like slowing down, Bram. It was the F-4 was power, speed, thunder, noise. The A-10 was all maneuverability, great visibility, a very, very difficult mission, and one hell of a gun. So it was an interesting transition, and but certainly something that I enjoyed. Right at first, as you'll see if you read the book, I wasn't too crazy about going to the A-10 because it was a funny-looking airplane. Still is a funny-looking airplane, ugly as they come. But those of us who transitioned from the F-4 to the A-10 soon became seduced by the capabilities of the A-10. It was a great airplane to fly. It did a wonderful job in the mission that it was designed to do. No other airplane is, or in the near future is likely to, support the troops and take out armor as well as the A-10. So interesting transition, but it was good. Let's see, here we are. Alexander Vater was using the AGM-65 IIR as a pure man's fleer, coming thing, or just an ad hoc invention. It was an ad hoc invention. Fighter pilots tend to do that. But in fact, when you had a weapon on board that would define heat sources, they simply learned very quickly that it was a pretty good way to look for things, and that's the way that came into being. Okay, let's see. Let's head on down a little bit here. Okay, I have this is Battle Waffle. I have a question. Did you have any targets in then communist Poland or only West and East Germany? Quite honestly, in the A10, we didn't have any targets anywhere. We trained to be able to respond if the Russians had come over the inner German border with massive armor, which of course they were always capable of doing. But we trained to be able to meet them at any point that they happened to be coming across. So we didn't have defined targets. Had that happened, we'd have broken things down into kill zones, much as they did in the Gulf War, and we'd have been cleared to engage anything that we saw. But no specific targets in the A10 at least. Brockwell Lane, what's it like firing the big gun on the A10? Well, let's get this out of the way early. I've got a little demonstration here, a little sample for you that I did on one of the videos, and I'll do it again. I flew the F-4E with the M61 Vulcan Gatling gun for a lot of years. Very capable airplane, very capable gun, and it fired these. It fired them at 6,000 rounds per minute, which is a pretty good rate from a 6-barrel Gatling gun. And it could do some damage, but not really to heavy armor. It was great against other airplanes. It was great against thin-skinned vehicles. Well, then I moved into the A10, and you may see a little bit of a difference here. The A10's gun, the GAU-8, fires 4,200 rounds a minute. That's 70 a second of these. And if you take a look at the two side by side, you'll see quite a difference. I'm talking about the A10 gun because that's what you asked. This was the A10 bullet. We'd go to war with a combat mix of 5 armor-piercing incendiary rounds plus 1 high-explosive incendiary rounds, the APIs to punch holes in the tank, the HEI to bounce around inside and make life pretty miserable for the crew. But firing it was a real treat because firing the gun, it was highly accurate, it was beautifully harmonized, and it could do a real number on things from a long range. You could fire it from about 4,000 feet out, and when you pulled the trigger, as I mentioned, 70 per second, you didn't need to pull it very long to get a pretty good burst. So when you fired the gun, it made a wonderful noise, and off it went, and you could punch wonderful holes in a lot of Soviet tanks. Okay, Josh Bayless, when you were stationed at RAF Bentwaters, did you do much training with the 48th Fighter Wing from RAF Lakenheath or any RAF aircraft? We did some dissimilar air combat training with the 48th Wing at Lakenheath. We did some impromptu air combat training, dissimilar air combat training with some of the RAF units, the guys out of Wattisham and places like that. But the systems, unfortunately, were such that Legally, we could only operate against the 48th because we could brief with them. We could actually sit down on the telephone. Didn't have Skype in those days, but you could sit down on the telephone, brief the missions, the safety aspects, and all the rest of it, and then head on out over the North Sea and have at one another. The tying it up with the RAF was a little tougher, but it happened. It happened very quietly, and it's been too long for me to get in trouble for it now, so I can tell you about these things. But all of those engagements were very, very worthwhile, and they were great training. Okay. Let's see. BAT-21. That's an interesting call sign. We used to support C-130s in Vietnam with BAT call signs, and BAT-21, you probably, or you may have gotten it from the movie about the airplane that got shot down. It's a good movie and an interesting role that they had. Your question is, did you ever fight the F-106 Delta Dart in DACT? I never did. I suspect some folks did, but I was never in a position to do that. And we didn't, I'm sure we didn't do a great deal because the 106 was one of those that was probably phasing out as the F-4 became popular. Rick's Life. Which fighter was harder to refuel? Oh, that's easy. Well, it's not as easy as it may sound. Actual refueling was much, much more difficult in the F-4 because the air refueling probe was on the spine of the airplane back behind the cockpit. And in order to get the boom where you wanted it, we used to have to rig up our rearview mirrors so that you could look at things. You could look at the boom coming out of its housing, and you could line things up as you were looking at the tanker's lights. But doing things on a mirror, as you'll appreciate, you're doing everything backwards, so it could get you a little bit discombobulated. The A10 was a piece of cake to refuel. The refueling probe was right in front of you on the upper part of the nose. But the difficulty was we had a hell of a time catching the tanker because we really didn't have much power, and you had to use some pretty good geometry to actually catch up with the tanker. Once you got there, it was easy. It was a piece of cake to refuel. Ian M. Hi, Ian. How was navigation in the A10 in the UK in bad weather with no GPS, etc., and just the map you talked about? It was an experience. There's a whole section in the book about this. We were quite amazed that they built an airplane that was designed to operate at very, very low level, initially in a European environment with shaky weather, and we had diddly squat for navigational aids, the magic. No GPS, no INS. As you mentioned, we would take big maps, cover them with plastic, and scribble all over them with grease pencil to put headings and distances and times, the things to try to keep us on course and to make sure that we were going where we wanted to go at low level. But that kind of arrangement was very, very difficult. Just imagine if you've ever tried to look at a professionally done map in your car and turn the pages and keep up with that. Multiply your speed by about 6. Multiply the complexity of the map by about 10, and multiply the distraction factor of being 100 feet off the ground by about 100. And that was pretty much what it was like. It was pretty exciting, but nothing we wouldn't have traded our lives for the kind of sat nav you've got in your car these days. Okay. Let's see. Waiting for something else to come up, I think. There we go. Harara. What do I think of the Pakistan Air Force? I really can't comment, Harara. I don't know much of anything about the Pakistani Air Force. I know they've got some very capable airplanes, and I know they've done reasonably well in recent skirmishes, but never having had anything to do with them directly, I'm afraid there's not much I can say about it. 67 Tomcat. Is there so much hate for the A10 from the USAF? Almost impossible to replace. I don't think hate is the proper word. I think shaky management is more like it. For some reason, and this has gone on for years, it's not a new thing. For some reason, the powers that be in the Air Force and many in Congress have always pushed to get rid of the A10, to buy more shiny, pointy-nosed airplanes. Every time they've done this, we've ended up in some kind of a conflict where the A10 shows and proves that it's the only airplane around that's going to do the job of supporting the troops on the ground, of taking out armor, and of doing exactly what it was designed to do. So consequently, for years, the A-10's been stumbling along with people trying to get rid of it. But let me tell you, it's still here. It's still going to be here for quite some time to come. And, they really don't have anything to replace it for the low order of conflict that we are more likely to be involved in. Okay. Oops. Let me go back up a little bit. Maris Gobs, have you had accidents, malfunctions with the A-10 worth talking about? Not really, and I'm delighted to be able to say that because the airplane is incredibly reliable. I know people, and I know of people who have taken terrible damage, certainly in the Gulf War, taken terrible damage from anti-aircraft artillery and that kind of thing. And boy, the good old hog brought them home. It's designed to take punishment. It does take punishment, but in terms of malfunctions, braking doesn't happen very often. It's a very, very reliable airplane. Okay, J.P. Gibbons. Greetings, Steve. How did flying on the edge of the envelope of the F-4 compare to the A-10? Apples and oranges, JP. You can't really compare the two because they were entirely different airframes. Once again, the F-4 was power and speed. It was able to work in the vertical. It was able to pull up and then accelerate downhill at a rapid rate. But of course, you need a lot of altitude to do that. And the F-4 was top of the heap in terms of doing that. The A-10, on the other hand, was predicated, and what it does better than any other airplane I know is it turns on a dime. It can linger in the battlefield or over the battlefield for long periods of time because it has good fuel, carries a lot of ordnance, and of course it's got that wonderful gun. So those are the differences. It's just that it's very, very difficult to compare the two airplanes. Let's see. We'll go back up a little bit here. That's what we're doing. Brian Pang is somebody who wants to be a pilot. Good on you, Brian. Keep it up. For the USAF, the USN, what would you recommend for my first step? Going to officer training school? Yeah, the first thing you have to do is you have to get a commission. So one way or the other, and there are various avenues to do that. You have to find a way to get yourself into the system, be commissioned as an officer, and then you need to start looking at the various avenues for applying for pilot training and that kind of thing. Now, I'll throw in full disclosure here. It's been 50 odd years since I went to pilot training. Things were very, very different then, and I wouldn't sit here and try to give you advice on how to do it. At the at the risk of touting the opposition here, there's another guy I did an interview called C.W. Lemoyne that has a website that is called Make Them Tell You No. Just write that down and Google it. Make Them Tell You No, and it's all about what your question is. How do I become a pilot? And a lot of people, a lot of pilots are on that website and ready and willing to give advice, and I highly recommend that you go there. Okay. Danielle Ahmed, in your opinion, should the USAF still keep flying the A-10? You bet. Nothing more to say about that. No doubt about it. 67 Tomcat. Do you think the F-35 can replace the A-10? Ha! Absolutely not. The F-35, that's one of those airplanes that the Air Force and Congress has pushed very, very hard to get in. They've wanted to take money out of the A-10 project so that they can build more F-35s. It's a good airplane for what it can do, but again, it has the same disadvantages in the mission of the A-10 that the F-4, the F-16, the F-15 have. It's too fast. It doesn't have the legs. In other words, it doesn't have the endurance to be able to stay over the battlefield and take care of the troops. And, dare I say it, it doesn't have the GAU-8 7-barrel Gatling gun. Okay, cheers. Bram Dronkert, what was it like to fly the F-4 with Afterburner engaged? Well, it depended. If you're asking me what it felt like, it was different. On the runway for takeoff, when you started the roll, plugged in both afterburners, it was an enormous kick in the butt, and it was something that was very impressive from the first time I did it to the last time I did it. And you could simply feel the power in the General Electric J79 engines that we had when you plugged in the burner on the runway. In flight, in combat, for example, it was not quite so abrupt. But if you unloaded the airplane, in other words, took the G off the airplane and plugged in the afterburner, it smoothly kicked in, and you could feel the acceleration. And once again, in a slightly different manner, you could tell just how much power was in that engine. Okay. Now, we talked about accidents and malfunction. Let me go back up the line here a little bit. Okay. Danielle Ahmed, which countries did you tour in your career? Oh dear, lots. But I'll keep it to the main ones. My first overseas tour was to Southeast Asia, to Thailand during the Vietnam War. I went from there to Spain, just outside Madrid, to a major American Air Force base called Torrejon. And then back to the States, to near near Miami as an instructor, and then to the United Kingdom to a base called Bentwaters and Woodbridge, twin bases side by side near Ipswich in the southeast of England. And from there, I went to be the operations officer of one of the forward operating locations that we built in Germany. And this, I'll harken back to one of the other questions that I've answered. We trained to meet the Russians head on if they came across the border. In order to do that, we initiated 4 forward operating locations that ran the whole length of Germany from north to south, spaced out. I was at the second one from the top near Cologne, a place called Nervenich. Wonderful assignment. I enjoyed it immensely. But there were 3 others. There was one north of us at Alhorn in the north of Germany, one at Sembach, which was near Kaiserslautern, an American base, and another one in Bavaria called Leipheim. But we pretty much covered the whole of the German border, and had the balloon go up, had the balloon gone up, we'd have been there to say hello to the tanks. Okay. Oh, I also, by the way, I'll fill this one in. I also had a very, very interesting tour in Iran. When I was stationed at Homestead in Florida as an instructor pilot, we sent a team of pilots, F-4 and F-5 pilots, to Iran to train some of their fighter pilots in dissimilar air combat tactics at a base called Cherokee in southeastern Iran. Wonderful assignment. It was a great time. Again, dare I say it, it's all in the book. There's a pretty good chapter about it in the book. Okay, the 88 Tench. I hope I'm saying that right. How often did you use the Paved Penny on the A10A, and when would you use it? We used it quite a bit. It was an excellent little system, just a simple little system. And if you had somebody on the ground, because once again our big job was supporting the troops on the ground. If you had a guy on the ground with a laser designator, and he had targets, he could illuminate those targets with the laser designator, point the laser at the target, and the Paved Penny would put a little triangle, or I'm sorry, a little diamond in your heads-up display with a dotted line coming back to the airplane. And if you flew that dotted line, it would assist you in seeing the target that was illuminated. You could also use it to see, and you could use the gun with it. You could drive in on the dotted line until you saw the target, use the gun. From a little bit further out, you could use the AGM-65 in concert with the Paved Penny. It was very, very useful. I understand now they've taken it off, and I don't know why. You'd have to talk to somebody who's a little bit more current in the airplane to answer that for you. Okay, let's see. Where are we here? I'm going back down again. Oh, okay, here we go. Okay. Josh Bayless, what was a typical A10 call sign when you were at Bentwaters? Well, as you might imagine, a lot of them had to do with pigs. We used hog a lot. We used warthog. But the other ones were computer generated, and they were relatively meaningless, other than the fact that they were different from any other call sign that was being used on that particular day. But the ones that I remember, hog, swine, we liked those a lot. If we could use them, we did. Brockwell Lane, could the A-10 take out helicopter gunships in the air? Brockwell, it could, and it did. The A-10 got 2 kills in the Gulf War, both on helicopters. And I can't honestly say whether they were gunships, but I suspect they were. But the A-10 took out 2 of them during the Gulf War. Not meant to be an air-to-air fighter, the A-10, but hey, when you got to, you got to, and they did very well. Okay, Bram Dronkard, I'm from the Netherlands. Did you ever train with the Royal Netherlands Air Force or any other countries in Europe? Yes, we did. We used to go to the gunnery range, Bram, at Vlieland. Vliehorst was the name of the range. And we used to do that both in the F-4 and the A-10s. We did that. Once again, I'll go back to the unauthorized but highly effective and important air battles that we used to engage in over Northern Europe. We used to go out, and this again, both in the F-4 and the A-10. You would go out, and in the height of the Cold War, there were so many military aircraft flying around over Northern Europe, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium. They were everywhere. As fighter pilots tend to do, if you saw other airplanes, your first instinct was to try to go gun him, and theirs were too. So it was not legal by any stretch of the imagination because we could not brief these little engagements. You could not call somebody over the phone and say, you suppose you're going to be over such and such at such and such a time. But it was targets of opportunity, and some of these air battles were the best I was ever involved in. Dozen airplanes up and down, Brits, Americans, Dutch, Belgians, all tying it up and all learning a great deal from the opportunity to do that. Okay, the 88 Tench again. What would a typical training flight onto somewhere like the Whole Beach Ranges be made up of, and how would they be planned? There were 4 ranges that we normally went to up in the Wash. Wainfleet, Whole Beach, Donanook, and Cowden. And because there were only 4, we got pretty familiar with them, so there wasn't a great deal of detailed planning that needed to be made. A typical mission would be with what they call a Su-33, which is a dispenser that carried cute little blue 25-pound bombs that had a little white smoke charge in them. And you would take off out of Bentwaters and Woodbridge. This is, by the way, both in the F-4 and the A-10. You would take off out of Bentwaters and Woodbridge. You would usually fly a low level up towards the Wash Ranges. And in those days, there were lots of places you could fly low levels. The UK had a number of authorized low-flying areas that you could go down and route around at 250 feet. And that in itself was good training, but you'd get up to the gunnery range. You would fly normally. They weren't big enough to fly tactical missions on for the most part, although we did some pop-ups and that kind of thing. But you would normally drop your bombs, and in the A-10, then you would go ravage their targets with that big gun. The targets on all these ranges were converted to what they call acoustic scores. The target itself was normally a big parachute, believe it or not, big round parachute on between 2 stakes. But in front of it was an electronic gizmo that broadcast an electronic field. And when you fired, if your bullets went through the field, the magic would count them, and you'd get instant feedback on how many hits you got. So that was good. We always enjoyed going to the ranges, and certainly every now and then you'd go up to be the range officer and have a chance to have some beers with the guys in the range tower, and that was a good deal too. Okay, was the F-4 the best fighter for its day? Absolutely, SPQR77. This is my humble opinion only, of course, but there's no doubt in my mind that during the 70s and the 80s, primarily, that there was nothing to touch it. The F-15 came along a bit later on, and the F-15 turned out to be a better airplane air-to-air. The F-16 came on a little bit after that, but I don't think the F-16, which they tried to make a jack of all trades, ever quite filled the bill. So the answer to your question is most assuredly the F-4 was the toughest fighter of its day. Let's see. Let's go back up. Let's see if there's anything different on there. Harara. What do you think of PAF? Now I know what you meant. Pakistani Air Force. I hope I answered that, although I really didn't have much to say about it. Let's see. Oh, you guys aren't out of questions already, are you? I don't see anything new as yet.
If you scroll up there, Steve, there's plenty of questions up there. It's like they might have dropped to the bottom, so maybe you can scroll up. MKMD Exploration and Paranormal might have had a question there if you see that.
Let's see. Yeah. I'm scrolling on down. Okay, here's one I haven't seen before. What was the standard Maverick loadout for the A10? Was it 2, 4, or 6? We could carry 6. Normally, though, you would find more likely that it was 2 or 4. 2 on each station would work very, very well. Oh, here we go. There we are, MKMD Exploration and Paranormal. Was it scary operating near the front line during the Cold War, knowing the end result? Certainly could be. It was an interesting thing because the German border was protected on our side by what they call an air defense identification zone, the ADIZ, and the Central European Buffer Zone, both of which overlaid right along the border. If you strayed into the buffer zone, which you were, unless you were briefed to fly in there, which occasionally you would do, if you strayed into the buffer zone, the voice of Big Brother would come up on guard frequency, and the voice of Big Brother would say, brass monkey, all aircraft in the vicinity of the buffer zone turn west immediately. And that did, I will say, send chills up and down your spine. And you didn't quibble, you didn't ask why, you turned west very, very rapidly, because that showed you that people who were watching you on radar saw that you were coming very, very close to bad guy land, and you couldn't do that. So, yeah, it could be scary. Usually it wasn't. The only thing that was, and this kind of refers to another question, the only thing that was a bit concerning was the fact that, once again, we had diddly squat for navigation tools. So there we were, probably pretty close to the buffer zone and to East Germany, and still flailing around with 4 feet worth of map with plastic on it. So that was concerning, but didn't really get scary until you heard brass monkey, brass monkey. Did I hear of any UFO stories during my time at Bentwaters? No, I didn't. I heard about one after I left Bentwaters that is reasonably famous, but I can't really comment on that because I wasn't around at the time. There are a couple of books written about that one, I think. Stinky 1701. I still have a 30 millimeter practice slug that my dad and I picked up at the Donanook Range on the UK East Coast in the 80s. Could that have been yours? No, and I'll tell you why, Stinky. Couldn't have been mine because the A10 doesn't drop its brass. The A10 retains the brass after the projectile is fired, and it's on a beltless system that revolves in the big belly of the airplane, so that the spent rounds recycle back to the rear, and once you land, they're downloaded, and they can go back and, as far as I know, make more bullets out of them. Let's see. MNH14, respect and miss the warthogs out of Bentwaters and Woody. Let me tell you, I miss being there. The tours at Bentwaters that I had, the 2 times I was at Bentwaters, were some of the greatest years of my life. I love that place, and will always think of it very, very fondly. Oh, here we go. Charlie Wilson, what are things you don't like about the A10? There's only one, Charlie. It doesn't accelerate. You can't go fast, even if you wanted to. But then again, I'll have to emphasize that that is because it wasn't designed to go fast. It's designed to be able to stay over a battlefield, to support troops. But if there's anything that I wish I had from time to time, it was a bit more speed. And in my case, with the early models, a bit more in the way of technology to help me navigate. That all came aboard later on with the transition into the A10C, and now they've got all the magic they need for that kind of thing, but we never did, and I wish I'd have had it. Bat21, what do you think of the Su-25 as compared to the A10? Don't know much about the Su-25. The only thing I know about it is it looks an awful lot like the A9, which was a Northrop airplane that was built to compete with the A10 for the ground attack airplane that finally ended up being the A10. Now, why does it look very much like that? I don't know. Maybe somebody somewhere was able to get a hold of the plans and kind of take a look at them and convert them. But as best I can tell, the Su-25 is quicker, moves faster, but again, it doesn't have that great big gun. And I would not trade any amount of speed for that gun. Let's see. Charlie Wilson, could you tell us about the impact of the gun on the airframe? How was it repaired, and how often would it be done? It rarely needed repairing because our maintenance crews took such good care of the airplane that they kept on top of it. The gun obviously created an awful lot of torque. It created an awful lot of vibration, and it created an awful lot of recoil. But the airplane was built to take that, and the ground crews, the maintenance folks, had ways of tracking that kind of thing and looking at it. The other thing that the other impact that the gun had on the airplane was over a period of time, the gun gases that came out of the gun when you fired it could build up a residue on the intakes of the engines. But there again, our maintenance folks were great at keeping those cleaned off and keeping them ready to go. Helzevek, how would you rate the A-10's survivability in a Soviet land invasion scenario during the time you were flying it? Um, I always hoped it would be pretty good. But you have to understand that you have a big, slow airplane that actually was designed to take hits. The A-10 was built to take punishment. It proved during the Gulf War that it was perfectly capable of doing that, and in fact, obviously, a Soviet land invasion would be accompanied by a vast number of mobile AAA guns and that kind of thing. I think we would have taken some losses. I think we would have taken some serious losses. The hope was we would have done the damage we needed to do before we took so many losses that we were no longer effective. Okay, Hunter Hertzfeld. Did the addition of the gun and ammo weight in the nose of the F-4E change the E's handling compared to other F-4 models? Not so I could tell, but I'm not an aviation engineer. But to me, the airplane flew as well or better than the F-4C or D model, and I flew them all, by the way, at one time or another. I think it was designed, and it was very, the gun itself, the F-4 gun, was very sleek, and it was nicely fitted into the nose of the airplane. So I think they did it. I think they did it in such a way that didn't have too much detrimental impact on the performance of the airplane. Okay, 67 Tomcat. You previously mentioned you trained with Iranian fighter pilots in the 70s. How was that experience, and do you find it surprising Iran is still flying the F-4D, F-4E? It was a fascinating tour, Tomcat. I spent 6 months over there, along with this team, a couple other F-4 guys and a couple F-5 guys, and a tactical radar controller from Nellis, who was real good at coordinating engagements. The experience was interesting because we even though we went to school before we went over there to learn about the culture and to learn about things that may be different in operating in a Muslim country, there was an awful lot they didn't teach us, and we had to figure it out for ourselves. I'll give you a couple of examples. FaceTime, not FaceTime, saving face. Saving face in Muslim country, as it is in the Far East, is very important. And we learned very rapidly that we could not instruct in the same way in Iran that we could in Florida or England or Germany. In other words, if I flew a training mission and I was the instructor, if I flew a training mission in the USAF or with the RAF or with any other fighter pilot from the West, I would expect to come back and be very, very direct and very, very succinct in debriefing that. In other words, I'd debrief it without pulling any punches. If I did that with an Iranian pilot, he would feel that he lost faith. So in other words, you would have to change your whole way of debriefing to make sure that you didn't offend him by being too direct or being too critical of his performance. Now, we learned to do that. I have my doubts that they got the same level of training that they would have otherwise, but hey, they were paying the bill. We were doing the job, and we had to do it the way they wanted it done. So we did. Um, the only other thing that I would comment on is is the fact that the political situation was pretty fraught over there, and because the Shah of Iran, who led the country at the time, was in some circles very, very unpopular. He ruled the place with an iron fist. He had a group of people. They call the Savak secret police, and there was allegedly a Savak member in every squadron. And this guy was there to keep an eye on everybody else and make sure that they weren't thinking in the wrong direction. Consequently, the fighter pilots, Iranian fighter pilots, unless you were one-on-one with them, no other Iranians around, were absolutely afraid to talk about anything that might be considered a little bit off base. So it was an interesting tour. I'll never forget it, and I enjoyed it.
So, Steve, we're gonna wrap up this Q&A, but maybe you can pick one or two questions just to finish off. That would be great.
Okay. Let me see what's new here. I'll scroll back up. Okay, Ian Saxon. Hi, Steve. Mike. Favorite memento or artifact kept from military flying days? There are a lot of them. I've got above my head here. You can't see them, but about 16 plaques from various squadrons that I served with, and all the rest of that kind of thing. I've got my good friends here that never let me forget what was fun about flying fighters. But one thing that hopefully you can see is if you look over my right-hand shoulder on the wall, you'll see a sword that's hanging with the blade down. That sword was presented to me by my senior non-commissioned officer in charge when I was retiring in my last job of commander of an operation called Air Warrior. I didn't know it was coming. I had no idea, but all the maintenance troops, the weapons troops, all the guys that serviced the airplanes and made things possible to go right chipped in for that little sword. And I got to tell you, it choked me up when they gave it to me, and it chokes me up a little bit now just talking about it. But that's got to be the prize. Okay, what else do we have here? Okay, I got to answer this one. I got to address this one. Blah. How much were the depleted uranium rounds used during training? If I can, here in this little group, I'd like to dispel the rumor of the nuclear bullet. Depleted uranium is nothing but a heavy, heavy metal. There is less radioactivity in a whole load of depleted uranium bullets than there is in a shovel full of soil that you get out of your backyard or your garden. Unfortunately, when they came out with the A10, when they came out with the gun, the bright sparks that put out news releases, it didn't twig on them that calling it depleted uranium would all of a sudden make it a situation that people would wave their arms and their eyes would get big and they get all excited about. We used them all the time. Every A10 round has the depleted uranium, whether it's a practice round like this one, with nothing inside, or the HEI and API that we used to fire for real. So depleted uranium, whenever somebody mentions it, tell them there's nothing to it. Okay. Let's see. Boy, there's lots of them coming up now, aren't they? Okay. Rick's life. Was it any different firing the gun or dropping bombs in a real situation as opposed to training? Or did your training take over in that situation? Yeah, it was different. The difference was you were generally not very concerned in training, but in the real situation, chances were, as you were firing the gun or dropping bombs, somebody was shooting back at you. And that in itself is a pretty good reason to be concerned. So the difference is it's all in your head, of course, but yeah, the training allowed you to do the job as you wanted to, but you always felt a little bit more vulnerable when folks were shooting at you. Believe me.
Well, Steve, I think we're going to end the Q&A there, but that was absolutely brilliant. And to the folks who joined in and asked, and put in the questions there, absolutely brilliant. But Steve, thank you very much for coming on. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you very much.
Okay, and thank you guys. I appreciate the chance to talk about this. I'm an old man now, but talking about airplanes and the things that I did keep me young, and I appreciate that.
And also go and buy, I think, is it on Amazon? And where else can we find your book, actually?
Yep.
Maybe
the book's on Amazon, depending on where you are. It's on Amazon UK, it's on Amazon US, it's on Amazon Germany, France, all over it. Just Google from Phantom to Warthog, or Google my name, Colonel Stephen K. Ladd. And it'll come up with all sorts of places you can buy the book.
So absolutely. Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you very much for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm sure we can get Steve back on the show because he's been brilliant. But thank you very much. Cheers.
You certainly can. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.